Hello and welcome to Code Rhetoric with Tam Talk. I am your host, Tam Talk, here to bring you a little insight into the coding and compliance industry, medical coding that is. So on today's episode, I want to talk about productivity. Productivity seems to be a buzzword. You hear it in different industries such as you must be productive, you must produce, you must meet productivity. So what exactly is productivity? So productivity is producing some sort of result. So when we look at it a little closer in the coding industry, it could mean various or different things or take on a different meaning depending on what level or what role or capacity you hold within the coding industry. So for example, if you're a coder, of course, there's certain productivity measures that you must meet. Whereas if you're someone like a compliance professional, there are other benchmarks or productivity measurements that you must meet. So as you heard me mention, I said productivity benchmarks or productivity measures or measurements. So with productivity, again, it is evidence of showing something or producing something. So when you're a coder and you're like strictly coding, you are to produce. You are pretty much transferring medical services into codes. And so depending on the health organization, there could be a benchmark or a productivity measure in which a coder must meet. You may see that perhaps like in your job description, or if you're a contract coder, you may see it in your job description what the benchmarks are, what the measurements are, such as you must code 8 cases per hour, 10 cases, 15, 12, 5. It depends, again, on the organization and perhaps with their specialty in which you're coding. They have productivity measures. Some of them could be, straightforward if you're experienced in that particular area that you're coding. And then some of those productivity measures could present a challenge, especially for a new coder or perhaps you're new to that particular specialty. It may present a challenge for you because you may not be comfortable with the ins and out of that particular specialty. So, but long story short, the health organization, or I would say the coding leadership, has set a specific standard or a measurement for productivity. So they need to see that you're able to not only meet the requirement or the productivity measure on a daily basis, they also may want to see you exceed it. And so what they do, this is data that is being analyzed, and they take this data, and this data can be used like in your performance reviews. It could be used in other areas, not so much specifically to your performance review. It could be they're looking at the overall healthcare organization data, analyzing like maybe they're using it to determine if they need to make changes within the process of the healthcare organization, such as, as it relates to the billing and coding. But for the most part, it is used to measure, your performance. Maybe if you're like continuously not meeting the productivity measure, perhaps you may need some more training. Perhaps it could be the specialty. Again, just because your productivity measure is low doesn't mean that you're not a great coder. It may just, again, be the area of coding or the body of coding that you are working. And so that gives leadership an idea, okay, then perhaps we need to move this coder to a different area or different specialty, or if they see that it's consistently not being met by more than one, I would say maybe 5 coders, then maybe that is a red flag that they need to like revisit their productivity measure. Maybe it's too high, Again, it may be too high. And then if everyone is consistently exceeding the productivity measure, perhaps it's too low. So again, that productivity measure is there, or that data is there to help leadership gauge how, to find that balance, in a sense, like balance with the coders as well as balance with the organization as in meeting the organizational objectives and goals. And then also on the other side of that too, so yes, you may be killing it, you may be exceeding the productivity measures every day, every week, But then we have to also take a look at the quality of your coding, right? We have to take a look at the quality of your coding. And so this is where the audits or auditors come into play, because now we need to assess if you're actually putting out accurate data or accurate codes. Because sometimes we may get caught in the midst of trying to meet or exceed the productivity measure. And as long as we can get it through like our edits, we're good. And sometimes we could be definitely, way off in our coding. So here's the thing. You don't want to put a whole bunch of stuff out or incorrect stuff out, codes out. But at the same time, you don't want to not put anything out. So again, that data is used to find that healthy balance of we're meeting daily requirements, but we're also putting out quality coding. You don't want to put out a bunch of incorrect codes, and then at the same time, you don't want to not put out anything at all. So that's the purpose for the productivity measures. And so I'll be the first to mention when productivity measures became a thing, I had heartburn. And it wasn't because I didn't think that I could meet the productivity. I just thought that productivity would take priority, like the speed would take priority over the quality of the work that was being produced. And then, repercussions and warnings and consequences would come into play because a coder it wasn't meeting the benchmark. And then I also question how are these benchmarks being determined, because the specialties or the complexity of the different specialties are different. So for someone who's doing I'm going to say cardiovascular or interventional radiology or maybe neurosurgery, those tend to be a little bit more complex areas to code versus someone, I would say, family practice, right? Of course, you can get family practice out because one, you're dealing with multiple chronic conditions, not all the time, but for the most part, that's really what you're seeing in family practice. Whereas with neurosurgery or interventional radiology or cardiovascular services, although they're specific to a specific system or systems, the work in itself is very complex. So if you are a surgery coder or a vascular surgery coder, it takes time because the vascular system runs throughout the entire body. So one, we need to look at where exactly is this surgery being performed? Did the surgeon maneuver or move through the body? There's different things. What branch? There's a lot that's involved with that. And so I tend to think for me, okay, if my leadership has never coded or say never coded that particular specialty, how can they determine the number of cases that should be coded? How can they determine the speed or the time frame in which it can be coded? And keep in mind, cases are different, especially, again, when you're doing surgery. Cases are different. Now, like with gastroenterology or your GI specialty, yes, you may get a lot of colonoscopies, upper EGD procedures. Yes, but I mean, even then, those can be different too because each patient is different. But again, when you get those more complex specialties, it tends to get a little sticky and requires more time to code them. And so we have to be mindful of that when we are setting these benchmarks or productivity benchmarks and measures for our coders. And sometimes people aren't great at time management. And what I mean by time management, some of us, we succumb to the pressure because although you may say, okay, this is the requirement, productivity requirement, like you're to code 5 cases per hour. Some of us aren't good test takers because it's almost like you're putting them in a position of taking a test or under a time or under a microscope. And a lot of us will succumb to that pressure because it's like they can't think well. It's almost like you're asking them to think quick on their feet, and they can't do that. They can't do that. So how can a coder be successful with productivity measures? Let's see. What tips have I used to help me not only meet the productivity measure, but also, I would say, ace my audits. So, that is a good question. How do you do that? One thing that I would recommend, especially if you're going to be coding a new specialty, is before you start coding, really take the time and be transparent and honest with your supervisor or team lead that you may need a little time, maybe an hour or so, to visit that area, like the guidelines and things of that nature of that particular specialty that you're getting ready to code. I do it. I've been in coding 20 plus years and I still do it. Because if you haven't coded a particular specialty in a while, you need to refresh or you need to refresh your memory, or you may need to shift gears, from coding one specialty or area to coding another area, excuse me. And so if you aren't familiar with that, it's okay to say, okay, can I have maybe an hour or so to really refresh my memory, or to take a look or review over the codes or the guidelines that are specific to this particular area of coding. So that's one way that I do it. And the second thing I do, honestly, I don't even keep up with, okay, I did 8. Okay, the productivity measure is 8 per hour. Okay, I don't keep track each hour. Honestly, I just code. I don't try to keep track of how many cases I've coded. I don't, I don't. I like coding. All right. For me, I'm a problem solver. So for me, it's like I'm in there solving a problem, especially when it comes to surgery. So I don't. I don't track how many cases I coded. If it's an easy case, of course, you're gonna pick up speed or pick up time. But if it's a complex case, it's gonna take some time. And I'll be honest, I have been reprimanded because I can get, my productivity can, it was a plummet because I get really involved in my coding. Again, I want to make sure what I'm putting out is quality coding. I don't want it to come back to the healthcare organization or be denied because of coding issues. It may be denied because of registration. It may be denied because of something else, but it shouldn't come back denied for coding issues. So I try to dot my I's and cross my T's when it comes to coding. And sometimes in doing so, it could slow up my productivity. Okay? This is why I opt for compliance. Okay? And I'm joking when I say I opt for that. One, because a bulk of my coding career has been in the compliance or corporate compliance arena. I'm more of the person who's doing the auditing of the content, the quality of your coding. So, as I mentioned, that productivity measure in that capacity is different from that of a coder. Do we have certain things that we need to do or complete within a daily or weekly or monthly? Yes. When we're doing audits, we have to do a certain number of audits depending on what our assignments are. We have to make sure we're auditing. We have to do a certain number of audits per day or per week or per month, because you're auditing, and auditing is a repeated cycle. So if you have, let's say 10 coders, right, and you're assigned 5, and here's the thing, you have to audit them, and not only audit them, you have to write up summary reports, you have to send it to the coder, there may be some discrepancies, there may, confusion or what have you. You may have to go back and forth with the coder, then you may have to revisit the audit, things may change, you may have to rewrite the summary and so on and so on. So you don't want to spend time, you don't want to waste your time, because again, and this is a repeated cycle. This is something that's ongoing. It's not like you audit 5 coders and then that's it. And who said you're just auditing coders? You could be auditing physicians and other healthcare clinicians. You don't know. I mean, it could be that. You could be also on the denials management team, the coding denials management team. You may be looking at that as well. So it's not just coding. You're looking at numerous things. You may be the person that coders come to for clarification on the guidelines or in their interpretation of the guidelines. That's part of that role as well. Because here's the thing, coders want to make sure they're doing it correct. And if you're in compliance, you're supposed to be that person who provides the clarity or interpretation, or to ensure that coder or that organization is within compliance, right? They're not committing fraud, that they're not coding incorrectly or improperly or what have you. That's our role, or that's the role of someone in compliance. And so, like I said, those measurements are different, but we still have to be productive. We have to produce evidence, right? We have to produce results to show that we are doing our work, that we are competent in our work. And so it's even, I don't want to say stringent or harder, especially when you're working remote. Because, okay, you're working remote. Now, we definitely need to see some productivity. We definitely need to see you produce something. And if you don't produce anything and you're remote, we can't pay you for doing nothing. We have to see something. Your work must be commensurate with your pay. You know, if you're not producing, we can't pay you. Like, we can pay someone else who's going to produce evidence or produce results for the payment. So yeah, so again, the tips, like I said, I don't have any specific tips. Or maybe you get a timer. I would maybe recommend a timer if you struggle with meeting your productivity requirement, and you may I suggest you get a timer. Maybe set it for like an hour, or you have it on your cell phone or what have you, and you set it, and then you just code. And then when the timer go off, you can see how many cases you've coded. And if I would say do it for maybe like 5 days, track it yourself. I mean, because, you know, leadership is tracking it. I mean, so it's not that you're not being tracked, but you can track your own as well. And then when it's time for your review, or if you have like a weekly or a weekly or monthly meeting with your leadership, you can provide that information to them to show, hey, look, this is what I did. I understand that my productivity has been low, and this is why. I mean, there could be other circumstances that cause you to be low in a particular week or month or what have you. But if it's consistently not meeting productivity measures, then yes. And after repeated attempts to coach you, to maybe move you to a different specialty or what have you, or maybe it's your Wi-Fi is slow or what have you, perhaps, and I say perhaps, that capacity may not be where you need to be. We need to look for other options within the coding industry to that's going to accommodate you, allow you to be your best coder or be your best self. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of productivity because I always feel like I produce anyway. And then again, the bulk of my career has been on the compliance side of things, the auditing side of things. So my productivity measures are slightly different. They're there, but they're slightly different from that of a coder, someone who's actually coding. Now, for someone who loves coding, productivity is not an issue because they're going to do well, okay? They're going to do well. But again, I say, you know, it depends on the person. There's, like I said, they are implementing coaching. They're like recoaching and they want to see you win. Don't think that your coding leadership, they don't want to see you win. They actually do want to see you win. They provide the coaching, the retraining. And what I mean by training, like they're not going to train you how to become a coder. they train you on the process of their organization. They're not going to train you or teach you how to be a coder. You should already know how to be a coder when you apply for the job. Point blank period. So, but again, if productivity isn't your thing, then you may not want to take on the role of being a coder. But there's so many things that you can do as with the coding certification, but I won't get into that in this episode because we're focusing on productivity. So to wrap up, I would say, again, get a timer, time yourself, because again, leadership and the organization, they are timing you. Time yourself, make note of that, and understand the productivity measures aren't there to punish you, or to squeeze you out of a position. It's really there they're trying to meet the objective of the healthcare organization as well as meet your needs. And so it provides the data that they need to assess or reassess maybe some processes or procedures within the organization or within the coding department so that they can make it a win-win situation for everybody or all parties involved. So again, eliminate the distractions. We have, like I said, we have distractions. If those distractions are continuously or consistently causing you not to meet productivity, then you may need to reevaluate maybe your area. Perhaps, go, if your company allows you to go back to the office, maybe go to the office. Or I would say, see if you can get a private workspace, like an office, workspace where it's just you in there to so that you can eliminate the distractions. Because with COVID and everything, we have children home, or some of them home, they're back in school, and other factors that come into play. DoorDash, Uber Eats, the phones. Some of us, we attempt to watch television, YouTube episodes and things of that nature. Without, that's neither here nor there. But yes, eliminate your distractions. That, I think, that is like really the issue with is we're so easily distracted. And so this may play a major role in our productivity measurements. All right? Or not meeting those productivity measurements. So I'm thinking that's it. That's all that I have when it comes to productivity. And if all else fails, like I said, find out what makes you happy within your career path and still allows you to use your coding background or expertise to reach your goal or a happy medium. So that's all I have for today's episode. That's it. So I'll be uploading. I can't say when or how consistent I will be, but I'll try to be more consistent than I was before with these podcast episodes. They will really be based on the questions or feedback that I get. And so I try to upload, again, answer the questions or provide some insight on, again, the coding industry based upon that information. So until next time, happy coding. That's all, folks. Toodles.